I'm Paula, and I'm an alcoholic. Boy, I'm so nervous right now, and I have coffee burps to top it off. Let's see. I'm going to just try to sum up my drinking for you in just 2 little stories, because I can only tell my whole drinking career if I start in it for 45 minutes, and I don't want to do that to you guys. Story 1. After my husband and I were married, he has life insurance, and we decided we'd get life insurance on me. So we went into this life insurance office, and we sat down. I was on the program, chronically honest at this point. And we sit down, and this guy asked me, he looks me square in the eye, and he says, have you ever abused or had a problem with alcohol, cocaine, barbiturates, amphetamines, heroin, what else did he say? Marijuana. And he went on and made this big long list of everything. And I said, all of the above except for heroin. And he just sit there and he stared at me. I think I just about blew his socks off, you know. It was a trip. But that sums up my drinking and my using career right there. Everything but heroin. And I abused them all. And the second story about my attitude, what it was like when I was drinking. Oh, I'm nervous up here right now. I feel like I'm sweating bullets. It's a joke. Not that. This that I'm going to tell you is a joke. That was a joke, too. There was these 2 drunks, and they were always going to the horse races every weekend. You know, they just knew that they were going to make it big any weekend. You know, I know you guys all know what that's like, to have those dreams. And anyhow, these drunks had the same dreams. And so they went to the horse races every weekend, and finally they hit it. I mean, they hit it big. You know, all their waiting paid off, and they hit it big. So they decided they were going to buy a racehorse of their own, and really make some money. So they got this racehorse, and they took it over to its new stall, and they started to lead him in, and they realized that the stall was too small for him. His ears were rubbing on the top, on the ceiling. So they looked at each other and they went, God, what are we going to do? So the one drunk looks at the other drunk and he goes, I know what we'll do. We'll cut a hole in the ceiling and then his ears can stick through. The other guy goes, great, I love it. That's what we'll do. So they start, you know, one guy's holding the horse and the other guy starts cutting away on the ceiling. He's going to cut this hole out for the horse's ears so it can stick out. And they're working away, and all of a sudden this somber-looking fellow comes up and he goes, what are you guys doing to this, you know, to this stall here? And they look at each other like, God, I've seen everything. Doesn't he know what we're doing? And he says, we got this horse, and he's too big for the stall, so we decided that we would cut a hole in the ceiling so his ears, you know, would have some room. And the somber guy just goes, whoa. Why didn't you, it's a dirt floor, why didn't you just dig out the bottom of the floor, and then he'd have plenty of room? And they just looked at him like, God, now I've seen everything. So the somber guy realizes he's just wasting his time on these guys, and he walks away. And the one drunk looks at the other, and he scratches his head, and he goes, that is the stupidest guy I have ever seen in my life. Doesn't he understand that the problem isn't that the horse's legs are too long? The problem is with the horse's ears. I like her. I'm going to keep eye contact with her. That was my attitude. You know, that was my attitude. I knew everything, and you couldn't tell me anything. My dad used to have a saying that anything that I don't know isn't worth knowing. And that used to piss me off when he used to tell me that. But that became my attitude also in life, very young. That became my attitude, that I knew everything, and everything that wasn't worth knowing I didn't know, which wasn't very much because I knew everything. And nobody could tell me anything. You know, nobody could convince me of anything. Yeah, I might just look at him and smile, but usually I didn't. I was a debater. And I wasn't only a debater, I was a chronic liar. And if I hadn't been there, I'd lie and tell you I'd been there, I'd done it, and I even touched the president's hand while I was there, you know. I mean, I didn't stop at any length. When I look back at some of those lies today, I get so embarrassed. All by myself, I get embarrassed just thinking back at some of my lies. So anyhow, that wraps up what I was like. I mean, that just sums it up right there in a nutshell. And when I got to this program, I had a real dilemma. I'm going to tell you what it was like the day that I came to this program, because I'll never forget it. The first time that I came to a meeting. I'd gone through a divorce. I was married for about 13 months, really sick marriage, both chronic alcoholics, and young, crazy. Whew. And we decided to separate, and we were separated. And I hated this man so much, you would not believe how much I hated him. I didn't see my disease. All I saw is that he was one sick guy, and he was the problem, he was the reason for all my problems. And I can't even explain the anger that I had for this man. I mean, I can't even put it into words. I mean, it was nauseating. I was sick all of the time when I thought of this man. And what was worse is I had to work with this man every day on a daily basis. We worked at the same place, and I saw him every day, and I hated him. God, I hated him. And I hated everybody that knew him, everything about this man. And I was going really crazy. I was at the point in my drinking, I was a daily drinker and a daily user. And I was at the point in my drinking and my using where I couldn't get drunk or loaded, but yet I couldn't do without it, and I couldn't get sober. I've heard a lot of people say that. It's really God, it was hell is what it was. I hated reality. I could never handle reality, and I sure as hell couldn't handle it towards the end of my drinking, especially with all this hate I had towards him and other people. And he got sober in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and this man changed like you wouldn't believe. I mean, he smiled, and he treated me so kind, and I felt so guilty for the hate I had towards him, and I thought, why doesn't he hate me like I hate him? And he just really changed, and that was what attracted me to this program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And one day, not being able to drink or use and get out of reality was really making me going insane. And I was really addicted to speed at this time and really addicted to pot, but I could only have the best. And a bunch of me and my friends couldn't get any sense of me, and we were going really crazy. We were sitting in a circle this one day, and I was really speeded out on methadone. And I just kept drinking beers, I couldn't get drunk. Drinking whiskey, no matter what I could get my hands on, I couldn't get drunk. I couldn't escape. I don't know whether it had to do with the speed or what, but I couldn't get there. And I looked at my friends, and we'd all tried everywhere to get a hold of this pot. None of us could get any. And I looked at them, I put my hands, like this. I was sitting outside, and I just said, I'm going crazy. But I didn't say I'm going crazy. I started screaming and raging. I'm insane. I'm going nuts. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm crazy. I'm just crazy. And I just kept mumbling it, and they all just kept looking at me. Whoa, man, we got to get this gal some pot. They were really worried about me. And they just said, go have another beer. And that's, that was kind of friends I had. Go drink another beer. Calm down. You're not crazy. If somebody was doing that to me, I'd say, yeah, you are crazy, man. But they didn't do that. My ex-husband drove up, and I asked him, would you take me to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting? And he wasn't going to take me. And I didn't understand this. I really didn't have anybody left in the world to help me. My parents were really religious people. And I never knew that they knew I drank and used a lot. And today I laugh about that, but then I really never knew. They knew the extent of my drinking and my using. And he wasn't going to take me at first. And now I know why, but I didn't know why then. I didn't know that they told him, you can't do anything for her. If you want to stay sober, you stay away from her, man. She's bad news. She'll bring you down. And I would, if I had half a chance. But I didn't know that. All I knew is I was being rejected again. And I wasn't going to get any help, and I wanted it so bad. I mean, once in my life I want help, and nobody's going to give it to me. But anyhow, to make a long story short, he took me to the meeting, anyhow, with a friend of his, and then we went and we sit down in the meeting, and he left. I wanted to kill him. And while I was sitting there in this first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and see, I was raised really religious, in a fundamental church and everything. And I sit down, and I could hear people talking on the other side of the room, and this one guy goes, have you ever wondered why they hold, Alcoholics Anonymous meetings in churches all the time? And the gal looked at the guy, and this isn't a joke, and he says, it's so you'll start going to church and put your money in their basket. And I just went, whoa, I know this isn't the place I want to be. Because I always felt when I turned my life around, when I finally quit drinking and using, I was going back to God, because I really had that guilt, and I wanted to go back to God, and these people were putting down God in the church. So after he walked out, I walked out right after him, and I hated him so much. I mean, I think I hated him before. I didn't think I could hate anymore, but I hated him even more that night. And I remember driving home, and I thought, God, I'm going to go back home, and I'm just going to open up that gallon of whiskey that I have, and I'm just going to drink the whole thing, And then I realized at that point, God, I am sick. I am an alcoholic. I'm running home, and I'm going to escape into that whiskey. And I cried all the way home. I lived in this 35-foot bus on a job site, and I went back to this bus, And I thought, I got to get rid of this right now. I'm just going to do this on my own. I'd never tried to quit drinking on my own, never, to this point. So I dumped the whole thing of whiskey down the drain, and it just goes right outside on the ground. But I had a gallon of wine, but I didn't pour it down, I just poured the whiskey down. And I went to the back of the bus, and I got out my shotgun, and I was going to shoot myself. I'd had it. I mean, this wasn't suicide attempt number one, but it was a serious, I was crazy this night. I was just crazy. Just bawling. You guys know what that's like. You're just hysterical. I mean, every energy you have is bursting out of your eyes. Tears are springing up against the wall. That's what I was like that night, and I was going to kill myself. And I started thinking that my ex-husband was so selfish that he wouldn't take me to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And I had the first selfless thought of my life that I can ever think of, and that thought was, if I kill myself, it'll kill my parents. I knew it wouldn't faze anybody else, except for they wouldn't have a drug dealer around anymore. But I knew it would kill my parents. I knew that, I was that selfless for that second that I didn't do it. And I cried to God, and I said, God, if there is a God up there, don't let me kill myself tonight. And I woke up in the morning, tears all over, and I'd written that night, and I had paper and pens and the shotgun. I was cuddled up to them all. And I didn't kill myself. Oh, I didn't kill myself that night. You guys didn't know that, did you? Anyhow, I was determined to make it on my own now. I don't need this guy. I don't need my ex-husband. I don't need Alcoholics Anonymous. Me and God are going to do this. And I didn't understand then, why the next day I got up and I took my speed and I smoked my pot and I drank the beer. But now I'm sneaking because I forgot to tell you. The next day, what I did is I went to my parents' house and I said, I'm quitting everything. And I've got all these Christian bumper stickers on the way there in San Luis, and I put them all over my truck, and I was going to change. So I hadn't drunk yet then, I was still sober, and I'd made it. I'd taken my speed because I justified that. And I drove down there, and I told them I was going straight, and on the way home I got drunk. And that's the way I lived for 2 weeks. I hid. And I'd never been, I hid. I was just like everybody else, drinking all the beer and then putting it in the bottom of the trash can. But I'd never literally hid. I mean, even my drinking buddies I had to hide from, because when I announced it to the whole world that I was going to quit drinking. And so I'm hiding out and drinking. And I drank on the job. I was a daily drinker. I drank from morning till night, beer, all day, and my dad was on the job, and apparently he knew I was drinking. And about 2 weeks later, my dad came up to me on the job and he said, Paula, I think you need to call Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, no, I don't need that. I tried it. They're just a bunch of Jesus-hating people, They hate God, and they're sacrilegious. And I said, you quit on your own. Why can't I quit up by myself? And he says, it was hard. And he said, Mom got this number for you. I think you ought to call it. And I don't know why I went and called it, but I went and I called Alcoholics Anonymous, and I went to my second Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, which was really my first, and it was a ladies' meeting, and I hated women. God, I hated women. I was a carpenter when I got to this program, and I thought women were pansies. I really did. All they talked about was diapers and husbands and all that baby stuff, And I just couldn't stand women. They were boring. They didn't know what a galvanized nail was. I mean, there was nothing to talk about with women. And I remember what I did. I put a skirt on, I put a skirt on so I would fit in. And I don't remember how long it's been since I wore a skirt, but I put this skirt on that I made in these thongs. I really thought I was dressed up. And I went in, and, here were all these women. And I'm not going to stand here and tell you, God, I was home the first night. It was heaven. I can't ever remember an ecstasy like that. It wasn't that way at all, not at all. I didn't understand what they were talking about. I didn't understand why they were laughing at the sick things they were laughing at. I wasn't only dying of alcoholism when I got here. I was dying of chronic seriousness. Everything was serious in my life. And these women would share things, and they would bust a gut over it. Just like this, and I would just go, whoa. And I thought, these women have never been alcoholics. They're fairies, man. They're church people. They are weird. And then they started talking about, and the topic that night was sponsorship. And I thought, God, now they think I need a woman to talk to every day, It was just really a trip. It wasn't home at all for me the first night, but there was hope. I don't know why, as negative as I was, and as closed-minded as I was about my disease and everything, there was hope. Because I didn't come to Alcoholics Anonymous I didn't actually say I'm going to quit drinking. I don't remember saying that. I just remember saying I got to stop going crazy because I was honestly afraid they were going to lock me up like my grandfather, and then I would die in an insane asylum like he did. He wasn't dead then, but since then he's died. But I was scared to death they'd lock me up like that, and so I just went to stop being crazy because I knew my ex-husband was crazy and he wasn't crazy anymore. But when I left there, for that hour and a half, I didn't feel so crazy like I had felt. I didn't feel that bottled up anger because I was into listening to everybody and judging them. Well, that lady is really, I don't know if you guys did that when you came here, but I didn't listen. I judged everybody and figured out what they were really like because I thought I was really good at that. I thought I was clairvoyant or something. And anyhow, they stress going to a meeting every day, and I didn't want my ex-husband to pass me up, and be better at this than me, because I felt I was better at him in everything else. I should be better at him in this too. And so I kept going to meetings as much as I could on it. I'm pretty sure it was a daily basis. I really am. And what it was is I was a guard on this job site, and I had no phone, and everybody would just come over right after work, and we would all just get drunk and loaded, and I knew I would never survive if I stayed in that bus and everybody came over. I would not be able to say no to the drugs and the alcohol. So every day after I get off work, I would shower and I would get in my car and I would go to San Luis. And that's the way it went, for about 4 months. And then it wasn't even that, it was a month, big whooping month. I went for 30 days. It was 2 meetings a day a lot of the time. And that's the way it stayed, and I was real high on this program. But when people would talk about personal defects or something like that, not me, man. I don't have any of those things. I'm not as sick as you guys. I'm only 20 years old. I'm not that sick. I never had a 502. I never beat up my husband or my wife. I beat up my husband, but they talk about beating up their wives, and I never did that. And I never beat my kids, but I didn't have any, but I kicked the crap out of my dogs, but they didn't talk about that. I never heard a similarity in this whole room. All I heard, it was like all I was doing there, after I got sober after 30 days, I forgot what it was like out there. I forgot the hell that it was like out there. All I remembered is I was feeling good, and I have this disease whipped. I'm not as sick as you guys. Everybody was old enough to be my mother and my grandmother there. And it pissed me off. I figured I had a good 20, 30 years out there left. If I could just get a little guidance from this insanity, I could go out and drink again. So after 30 days, the honeymoon was kind of over. I wasn't the big new person anymore, and I wasn't real important and popular anymore. I was just another person in Alcoholics Anonymous. They didn't clap anymore when I came in or nothing. And I didn't like it anymore, and I met up with this guy, and pretty soon he was everything. They told me Alcoholics Anonymous had to be my #1 priority, and it was. As much as a workaholic as I was, it pretty much became my #1 priority until I met up with this guy, and then it wasn't anymore. He was. And I believe it or not, I hung in there without Alcoholics Anonymous being my primary purpose or goal, my #1 priority. I hung in there for another 4 months. And when I was 5 months sober, I still hated everybody, but not as much. I went to a wedding, and they made a toast, and I drank with them. And I took that one sip, and it was just like, I didn't grow fangs or anything like I thought I was going to, like everybody told me. And everybody kept saying the first drink would get me drunk, and I thought, whoa, I know these guys are pansies now, because I was one of those that had the high tolerance to alcohol. I thought that was really neat to go and spend $100 a night on drink. And now that I look at it, that was stupid. I wish I was the other way. But then I thought that was really neat. And I took that thing, and then I realized what they meant. God, that's what they were trying to tell me, because I couldn't stop after I took that one little sip. I couldn't stop. I couldn't even wait for him to come around. In fact, I was over at the little fountain, just like this. And, I'd like to tell you that night was terrible, but it wasn't. For 5 months, I'd waited, for this. And I had so much fun that night. I really did. And the next morning, that's when it was hell. That's when I realized that I had to go back to California in a couple days. And I had to decide whether I was going to go through this crap all over again. I had a big 5 months. I had a big 5 months, and there was no way I was going to start over at day 1 again. There was just no way. And it was really a terrible, the whole rest of the trip was terrible. It was just hell. I cried all the way home. I had to say goodbye to my girlfriend. I made an ass of myself on the plane, blubbering all over the place. It was just really terrible. But I learned enough around here to know that I wasn't going to be one of these take one drink or get drunk one night and then go back to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was going to be one of those that made myself sick of alcohol before I went back to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was going to prove to myself that I could not control my liquor before I came back. And that's exactly what I did for 30 days. I was a daily drinker, but I was not a daily drunk. You know, I could really hold my booze. Well, I couldn't anymore when I went back. I was drunk, and I knew all the yets. I wasn't drinking and driving. I wasn't drinking with an open container anymore like I used to. But anyhow, I really got it on for those 30 days, and I was drunk every day, and I was hungover every day, and it was hell. And I wanted to make it hell, and it was hell. And on Christmas Day in 1980, I called this lady that I hated because she was macho, and to me, women were competition, but another macho woman was even more competition for me. And this woman was pretty blunt, you know. She was pretty tough broad. And so I called her, and I said, how you doing? Have you figured out I've been drinking yet? You know, and of course she knew. Everybody, you don't do anything in Alcoholics Anonymous without everybody finding out. And she said, yeah, I kind of heard it around, you know, played it real light. I mean, it was hardly a topic one night at a meeting for all I know. And I said, I really need help, and I want to know if you'd be my sponsor. And she goes, well, the women's meeting's tonight, the same one I went to before. She goes, why don't you come? And I was in Arroyo Grande, and I had a terrible Christmas that day. Terrible. So I went to that meeting that night, and I haven't had a drink since that day. And it was so different. I mean, now I was surrendered. It was so different. I was so scared. I was so scared I would drink again, and I would have to go through that hell that I went through for those 30 days again. That guilt all over again. I was so afraid that I would go through that again that I was willing to go to any length when I got this program. I was one of those, you know, that came back, and I was chronically serious. Now, I used my seriousness for a good cause this time. And after the meeting that night, I said, I want to do the steps right away. And she's one of those that think that you should, you know, bathe in the sunlight of the Spirit for a while. Well, I bathed in the sunlight of the Spirit for 5 months, and I didn't get nothing but drunk. And I said, no, I've already tried that way. I don't want to do it that way. I want to do the steps right away. I mean, I was panicking. She goes, okay, easy, you know, go home, read first 3 steps, and we'll call me tomorrow. And that's the way I did it. I panicked out. I think by the time I was, 3-4 months sober, you know, I was in a point where I was continuing to work the 10th and 11th step. And I remember after I finished that, you know, I mean, I'll never finish my 9th step, but after I finished the list that I had made of my 9th step, I thought, this is it, man. This is utopia. I'm here. I have arrived. You know, I'm not even going to rewrite the big book and put women in there more. And I did that at a meeting when I was secretary once. God, it was embarrassing when I found out you don't do that. But anyhow, I was on such a high this whole time, and everything was going my way, you know, and I felt so good through this period that I thought this is the way it was going to be for the rest of my life. And the reason that there was people in meetings that complained is because they didn't work the steps. You know, they were bathing in the sunlight of the Spirit still, and that's why they had problems. But I wasn't going to have them anymore because I worked the steps. And, whoa, you guys know what was ahead of me, don't you? It blew my socks off when trouble came my way. I thought, I've done a step wrong. There was something I didn't tell her in my 4th step. God, I've got to do it all over again, you know. I really believed that there would never be any problems. But what I found out through that first experience is now I have a way to deal with these problems. And that blew me away. I was so excited. When I went to the meeting that night after my first dilemma, and I knew how to handle it, and I knew what to do about it. You know, I knew if I could change it, and I knew if I couldn't, I could give it to God, and I could learn to accept it. And I'd never known that in my life. Never. Never. You know, I'd never known that. And what happened is they say in that 4th step that until you take that personal inventory, that this faith that you know all about isn't going to do you any good. And that's what was happening to me. You know, I had great faith. I mean, I knew all about God and everything. Jesus, the whole burrito, you know, I knew all about it. I knew about it for years. But I could never live that faith. You know, I would turn my day over every day like everybody told me to when I was still bathing in the sunlight of the Spirit. And, but I didn't. I thought once you gave it to him, that was it. Everything that you did, that's because you were supposed to do it, and everything you didn't, he was supposed to do. Well, I did everything. So he had time off all the time. And, but after I took that inventory, you know, after I took those steps, then I could practice that faith that I had learned, and that's what the difference was. You know, just like most of my dilemmas, I couldn't do anything about it, my first one after my steps, but I could pray about it. And when I was new, I had this little God jar. I don't know if you guys have ever had a God jar, but if you don't know what to do about a problem, you know, if you don't know if you just can't handle it, if it's just driving you crazy, you prayed about it and you just keep thinking about it, you write on this little paper and you put it in this God jar. And that's what I did with this problem. God, you should have heard me talking about this God jar that night at the meeting. Everybody thought it was gold-plated, you know. I was so excited about my God jar, and now I'm okay. everything's all right. And that's what I found from taking the steps. You know, when I got here, I want to tell you what my conception was of God when I got here, because it's really different than it is today. You know, my conception of God is that he used to have this little book, and it's called Paula's Sins book. And I pretty much figured that by the time I got to this program, I had a library of these books, you know, because mine overfilled young. And most people just had one book, but I was really unique. I had a bunch because I was that bad of a person. And so God didn't like me anymore when I got here. You know, before that day came when I asked my ex-husband to take me to a meeting, I used to lay in bed for a while before that happened, and I used to cry at night and ask God to help me to not get up and use and drink in the morning. And I would picture him looking down at me going, whoa, whoa, and just shaking his head and leaving and walking away from me. And so when I got here, that's how I pictured it, you know, and even when I was working the steps, that's how I pictured it. And every time somebody'd say about giving it to God, I'd think, whew, you know. But my sponsor was really, really good with me because I was a real immature, you know. You either talked construction or dogs or alcohol or drugs to me. That was all I communicated on. That was the only levels I knew anything about, really, that I could communicate about. And so I had this Great Dane dog that I'd had since he was 6 weeks old. He was just a little fart. Now he was a huge fart. He was just big, you know, and he was my all, he was my everything when I got to this program. I mean, we went everywhere together. He even had his own little bed in the bus and everything. And I loved this dog. You know, I had a lot of love to give away. As selfish as I was, I had a lot of love to give away, even then. And so anything that I didn't understand, my sponsor would relate to construction or my dog. And one time we were having a conversation about God, and I said, do you really believe he gives a shit about us? Do you really believe that? I mean, have you ever pictured the whole world on a mass scale, and then he's looking down and he's zooming in right on me? No way. He zooms in on, you know, Oral Roberts and people like that, you know. He doesn't zoom in on people like me. I said, he doesn't like me anymore, you know. And besides that, I'm tired of his trials. She goes, his what? I said, his trials. You know, he's always putting up little tests to see how I do at them. Whoa. You know, she knew she had a live one now. And she goes, Paula, I don't know how to explain this to you, but the best way I can figure out is look at your dog, Josh. She goes, do you set up little obstacles for him when you get up in the morning to see how well he does, how good he handles him? No, I don't do that to my dog. You know, I love my dog, man. So she says, do you keep a little log of every time he chews up one of your things when he's mad at you? Do you keep a log of that? And I said, no. You know, it's no big deal. I paddle his butt and we get over it and we go on with life, you know. And explain to him, you're not going to do that again, you know. Talking to his face and tell him what to do. And she goes, well, that's the same way God is. She goes, that's the same way it is with you. You know, he loves you more than you even love that dog. No way. You know, I really love that dog. And, but I worked on that for a while, you know. And she goes, you know, when Josh comes in and he used to carry these chocolate milk cartons in his mouth from the job, and you couldn't see him because he had those big flappy lips, and he'd carry it in and then he'd drop it and he'd tear it up while I was asleep. I'd wake up and there's this milk carton all over the bus. And she knew, I'd shared that with her before, and she knew it pissed me off. And she goes, when that happens, do you beat him all day? Do you remember that, you know, and dwell on it all day and go over and over it with him all day? And I said, no. I pick it up, tell him not to do it, and that's it. I forgive him, you know, no big deal. She goes, that's the same way God is, you know. It's the same way God is. He takes one of your trips at a time, you know, and he forgives every one of your little trips at a time, and that's the way he does it. And, whoa, I could handle that. You know, I could handle that kind of God as I understood him. You know, a dog watcher. I could understand that kind of talk. And she had a lot of neat correlations like that for me. And another neat one was, I don't remember if she told me this or I figured this out or what, to tell you the truth. But to look at the steps, I used to think she told me, but since I'm not sure, I don't want to lie, so I'm going to tell you I don't know. But I know I heard it somewhere, either in my own mind or somebody else's. And anyhow, she said to look at the steps like a nail bag. You guys know what a nail bag is? Carpenters wear them. They have measuring tapes and all your tools in them, and that's where you get all your tools from, or on your hips in leather bags. And she says, every time you take a step, she goes, look at it like you came into the program and you emptied your nail bags out completely and you came in with nothing. She goes, and you know you can't go do a house with nothing. And I said, no. And she goes, you can't build anything. And I said, no, you're right. And she goes, every time you take a step, you put a tool in your nail pouch. You know, if you you take step 1, you put a measuring tape in there. You take step 2, you put a pencil in. 3, you put a hammer in. And eventually you accumulate all your tools. And now you have something to work with. You have something to build with. And that's how I look at the steps. Life isn't perfect today. I still have my emotions. I still get mad. I still get jealous. I'm one of those terrible moms that I even get mad at my kids, and I take out some of my anger at yelling at my kids. And, but the tools of this program even help me with that. They even help me with that. I've learned that they're kids, and every time I get mad at them, that I get over that situation and I go on to the next one. I don't add them up like I used to in my drinking days. One thing happens, it's going to be one of those days, and you have a terrible day, and by the end of the day, you add it all up and you tell somebody the whole line of bad things that happened. Well, I've learned I don't have to do that anymore. I've learned I could start my day over. I learned I can forgive my kids each time something goes wrong. I've learned to love. I've learned to understand. I never knew how to understand. That was my biggest dilemma, is nobody understood me. And if everybody understood me, I wouldn't have this problem. Drinking days. One thing happens, it's going to be one of those days, and you have a terrible day, and by the end of the day, you add it all up and you tell somebody the whole line of bad things that happened. Well, I've learned I don't have to do that anymore. I've learned I could start my day over. I learned I can forgive my kids each time something goes wrong. I've learned to love. I've learned to understand. I never knew how to understand. That was my biggest dilemma, is nobody understood me. And if everybody understood me, I wouldn't have this problem. I know so much, if they just listened to me and understand me, I'd be okay. I was always screaming that thing. And the first time I heard, have you ever tried to understand rather than to be understood? Of course I said, of course I have. But really, when I thought about it, I never had. I never, ever had. It was the same thing in my first marriage. You do this, I'll do that. You don't do this, I don't do nothing. It was like, scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Understand me, and we're doing great. It wasn't understand me, I'll understand you. It wasn't anything like that. And I learned that here. And that little tool right there has saved my butt, It makes my marriage today fantastic, because I try to understand him some of the time. I don't know. I don't know. A lot of people say, I don't know. A lot of people say a lot of things. Anyhow, I love today, and I never knew how to do that before, because I never knew how to give of myself. And when people used to share with me about selfishness, I never understood that. I am not a selfish person. I am not. That's how I felt when I got here. I'm not a selfish person, because I do everything for everybody. I'd drive you to San Luis right now if you asked me to, I really believed that I was a good-going person, and I did nice things for everybody. I took everybody out to lunch, because I made more money. I took everybody out to lunch. But I never understood until I was sober a while that everything I did, I have this little calculator up here that goes, Pamela owes me 1 trip to San Luis if my truck ever breaks down. Susie owes me a half a lid. Joey owes me 3 hits of speed, Pam owes me 4 dinners now. Just about time she pays them back, And I never tell you that you owed me all this stuff. I just kept a little track in here. I never realized that everything that I did was self-centeredness. Everything I did was self-centered. I did it to get something back. I did it to be accepted. I did it to be loved. I did it to be liked. I did it to fit in. I did it for any reason except for to just do it. I never knew how to do that. And I'm learning how to do that today. I like to tell you that everything I do is totally selfless, but it isn't. It just doesn't come naturally. Natural. That's how you say it. For me to do everything selfless, it just doesn't come natural for me. It's something I have to work on. I don't know. Like I shared with you, that first time they talked about personal defects, I wrote a list, and I thought, well, I've got to have one. So I used to write in meetings, and I wrote this one down. I thought, I know what it is. I'm a really impatient person. And I wrote that down. That was my list. There was my 4th step. I've taken that step now. That's the only defect I thought I had. I balked at every defect that somebody called me on when I really came to this program, when I really started to work this program. I balked at every one of them. I'm not selfish. I don't have an ego. I hate myself. I balked at all that stuff. If I didn't have an ego, I wouldn't be so into myself to realize I hate myself. I wouldn't be picking every flaw up out of my face if I didn't have an ego. I never knew I had any of those. Now I know about all of them. I don't know if it's better or worse. Now, I got to believe that it's better, though, because it's really different today. The difference today is when I hate my husband so much, I don't sit there and make a list of everything he's done wrong. It's becoming to the point where it's almost natural in a few minutes, it's almost natural for me to think, where have I been at fault in this matter? Now, I'd like to tell you, my first thought is always, oh, that's where it was. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's nowhere. I'm not at fault in this matter anywhere. But I know that I am. I know that I am. And so eventually it comes around to, I can figure out something, where I'm at fault in this matter. And then, see, I keep it on me and not on him, and then I don't hate him anymore. Then I try to figure out how I can correct my thing rather than to correct him. I figured out that every little thing that I feel, that I experience, everything, stems from self-centeredness, self-seeking. Everything. If I'm depressed, it's self-centeredness. If I'm angry, it's self-centeredness. Where have you made me mad? How have you affected me? You've hurt me. I've been offended. Depression. I'm depressed because nothing's going my way. When I'm scared something's going to happen to me. I could go on and on. It all stems from my self-centeredness. So today, it helps me if when I start to deal with a fear or something like that, like last night, when I was sitting at the convention, I was like, God, I can't believe, I didn't know the convention was this weekend when Art asked me to speak this week, and I don't know what I would have done, but I hoped I would have canceled. I was sitting there listening to that guy last night, and I thought, I've got to follow this act. A whole weekend of all these speakers, I've got to follow this Sunday night. Everybody's high. I'll put them all down. They'll all go home. They'll be level when they leave. And, I don't want to do that. And I was driving home. We were driving home last night, and I was starting to get nervous already. I was starting to shake and everything. And I thought, that's what it is. It's self-centeredness. That's why I'm so darn nervous, because I'd like to come up here and dazzle you so much that you never drink again. And in 10 years from now, you get up here and you say, I owe my sobriety to Paula. I was at a convention all weekend, and I heard great speakers, but it was Paula who really did it for me. She showed me how to live, showed me what sobriety's all about. That's what my ego would love to happen. And once I realized that that's what it was, then I thought, well, no wonder I'm so nervous. That's the impossible. That's impossible for me to even achieve that. If one person left that dazzled, it'd be a miracle. And then I had to remember, I had to bring it down to root one. I'm there to stay sober. I'm there just to, I don't know what the hell I'm there for. I'm there to carry the message. If nobody likes my message, that's okay too. I didn't drink, for this hour. I didn't drink. And then I was okay. Then I was all relaxed. But when I was sitting there tonight, little ego committee adjourned, let's trip out on this speaking again. And it started rolling again. You're not going to be able to get up there and dazzle them. Look at all these people. They're going to think you're sick. They're never going to believe you. They're going to think you're lying. They're going to think you're the sickest woman in the world. It started tripping on me again. I started getting really nervous. And then I had to remember, the same thing. But anyhow, when any of these trips come along, even when I don't see it and I don't want to say it, my automatic prayer now is, God, show me where self is involved here. Reveal where this, this self trip is right now, where I'm at fault, why I'm so into myself right now, or relieve me from this self-centeredness, relieve me from this selfishness. I don't care if you reveal it to them or not, just take it away. I hate self trips. I hate them. I don't like them, but they're okay. I learn, I grow from them. But I know when I'm entering one, and I don't want to enter it. And I know today, and I never knew that before, and that's the great miracle of it today. One, that I know where I'm at fault, and two, that I know where I can go, and I never knew that in my life. I never knew that God loved me and He cared for me more than I did that dog. And today I couldn't imagine living life without God or this program. I really couldn't. I have friends that got sober when I did, or shortly after I did, or right before I did or something, and they don't go to meetings on a regular basis. My hat's off to them. I don't know how the hell they do it. I really don't. If I'm not in contact with somebody from this program or an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting at least every other day, since we have children now, we can't be a daily meeting hitter, but at least every other day, I start nutting up. And what happens is I lose God. I think God's abandoned me, but I know today He never abandons me. I abandon Him. When I feel alone, when I feel like nobody likes me, and I've made everybody mad, I know He doesn't like me over there. When I start tripping out like that, I know what's happened. and that's that I've lost my spiritual contact with God. And I'd love to tell you that after, 4.5 years of sobriety, that it just comes, and I could leave this program for a year, and I would feel spiritual as heck every day, but I can't. I'm still a babe, man. I still need touch with these programs. I still need to hear and see the miracles in this room to remind me that God does care, And I've come to realize that we're the ones that he taps in with, not Oral Roberts. He's got it together, He's got it together. It's us, that God's here for, and I never knew that. That's what he's here for. That's the way I look at it today. Ego or whatever, that's the way I look at it today. That it's us. That his primary care is us here in this room. Thanks for listening to me. I'm glad you asked me now.
Seems to me that I'm not any longer fighting booze. The obsession has been lifted out. Release, he talked about. And then he went away. Didn't press me, didn't evangelize me, didn't try to save my soul. I went on drinking for a while. And in no waking hour could I get the spectacle of that fellow sitting across that kitchen table out of my mind. So here you were. Young had said it's hopeless. Hazard had got transformed. He passed it along to Abby. Abby had been exposed to these people who were practicing what they preached. And he, another alcoholic, was talking to me across the kitchen table. And then in my background was another god of science who said, no, science can't do it for you. So, I was being made ready through all these agencies and people for what was about to happen. There became another time with his friend Shep. I remember going down to Old Calvary Mission, getting there terribly drunk. They were about to throw me out. I said I was looking for something. Abby said, how about a plate of beans? They get me sober enough. They take me in. I sit with the other penitents. I take the walk up the aisle. And as I knelt there among those squatty people, I remember getting a little feeling of something new and different. And then it was gone again, and I went back to drinking, and I went back to fighting this God idea. But always the face of this drunk across that kitchen table. And I knew that he wasn't on the waterway. Something had removed his obsession to drink. So I said, well, if there's any great doctor, I'd better seek him out. But first of all, I better get sober. I go back to Towns Hospital. Oh, a month ahead of the DTs this time. Not in too bad shape. Determined to get sober and have another look at this neat little formula. I arrived there, bottle in hand. I remember Silky standing in the hall, shaking his head. I yelled at him, waving a bottle, saying, this time I got something, Doc. He said, I'm afraid you have, boy, upstairs to bed. The poor old man really loved me as he loved all of those 10,000 drunks that have gone through Knickerbocker and the other 30,000 he talked with besides. So I go to bed. 3 days later, my friend shows up in the door. I said, maybe he's going to evangelize me. Maybe he's going to put heat on me. Maybe he's going to try to save my soul. Didn't do any such thing. He was full of that great Christian virtue called prudence. He knew my prejudices. He waited and made me ask, Abby, what's that neat little formula? Oh, yeah. You get honest with yourself. You get honest with another person about yourself. Internal house cleaning. Clean away the debris of the past. Help others with no demand for reward in prestige or money. Pray to God as you understand Him for guidance to direct your life, and He spell His success. As simple as that. Nothing more, nothing less. And soon he was gone. And still I rebelled. And suddenly, I suppose, and momentarily certainly, this terrific ego of mine just collapsed. And I dropped into a terrific depression. And in the agony of that depression, I cried out. I said, now, I am prepared to do anything at all to get whatever it is. Like a cancer patient, if there's any great physician. If there is any God, let him show himself. And then the place went electric in a great white light. I was seized with an ecstasy, which is in nobody's power to describe. In the mind's eye, it seemed as though I was on a mountain, a great wind is blowing. I think, this is not air, this is of spirit. I'm free. Then the ecstasy subsides, and I find that I'm in another world. A world in which everything is all right, no matter how wrong it seems to be. The assurance was complete. There was a sensation that I was surrounded by and suffused with a presence. And I thought to myself, so this is the God of the preachers. Such was the gift that I received that day. And such were the sources through which it had come. Well, pretty soon another source comes walking into that hospital in the shape of a book. It was called Varieties of Religious Experience by William James. I think it was then in circulation among the Oxford groups. And I remember how avidly I went through those pages, kind of a learned document, a little over my head. But out of it stood these common denominators. The people who get these transforming experiences the more readily are those who utterly surrender and give up. Then the transformation sets in. Oh, sometimes in a blaze such as mine did. That doesn't make any difference. It may take weeks, may take months, but it is a transforming experience that apparently arises out of some terrific collapse at depth. That much stood out of those pages. And then I realized how I had been conditioned for this. The God of science, Dr. Jung, Dr. Silkworth, said no. You can't do it on your own resources, and you can't do it on the resources of science. Of yourself, you are literally nothing. It isn't a question of God's help, and you'll do it. You can't do anything. And when we got to that point of complete defeat, when those cases in the book did, then the transformation would set in, and would so change and remotivate the people of faith that it couldn't be accounted for by any association or program of discipline or whatever. It began to be clear what's happening. So I get down to the Oxford group. Now, when I arrived down there in the Oxford group, I think I crossed Sam and his dear friends in almost as much trouble as the guys with the alarm clock. Because I had this very fixed idea. Maybe it was partly inspiration, but I fancied there was a good deal of conceit in it. I was soon heard to say, I am going to sober up all the drunks in the world. And we set out a pace to do it. The house over Clinton Street was filled with drunks. We visited them at Calvary, Mission, up at Towns Hospital, anywhere we could lay hands on them. and nothing whatever happened for 6 months. A brief period of sobriety, and then bang. Meanwhile, I was telling people about this strange experience. I was preaching. I was teaching. I was playing the Messiah. And nobody would buy it. So one day, pretty crestfallen, I went up to confide in good old Doc Silkworth. He said, "Look, Bill, you got the cart before the horse. What about this James book? You used to talk about it. This idea of getting this deflation at depth. He said, you're running around talking about this mystic experience of yours and people think they're nuts. No, he said, you've got the cart before the horse. You can identify with these people. You've had a drinking experience. You can do it where I can't do it. But then why don't you pour it into them? How utterly hopeless from a medical standpoint this thing gets. The obsession that condemns them to drink against their will and their best interests, and the increasing bodily sensitivity that ensures they'll go mad or die. Pour that into them, and maybe that'll soften them up. And then they'll buy some of this morality and some of these ideas that will cure them. About that time, people began to murmur, why doesn't this guy go to work? In fact, I think some of my friends got guidance from God that I should go back to work. It was eminently practical guidance. So I began to sit around Wall Street brokerage houses like Micawber, waiting for something to turn up, and it did. And suddenly I'm in the midst of a little proxy row that took me out to Akron, Ohio, and there's a great milling around, and through some quickly found friends, I hope to get control, listen to the word, of a small company, and then, of course, that would supply me the living in my spare time. Maybe we'd fix some drunk. We get to Akron, the deal blows up in my face, my friends depart in disgust. I'm in the Mayflower Hotel with $10 in my pocket, not enough for a fare home. For the first time since that experience in Towns Hospital, I began to be afraid. I found myself walking up and down in the Mayflower lobby. It was Saturday afternoon. The bar room was filling up. Then I eased down to the other end of the corridor, and there stood a church director. And absently I kept looking at him. Then suddenly I was seized with a real panic. I said to myself, look, my friend, you're in a fair way to get drunk. Then I'd walk up and down again. Well, why not go in the bar room and order a bottle of ginger ale? You might scrape an acquaintance. Pretty lonely there. And then it occurred to me, in fact, it was borne in upon me for the first time, that even though the effort I had made with other alcoholics had apparently brought nothing to them, it had brought a great deal to me. Then I say, oh, not teacher, not preacher, not evangelist. No, I need another alcoholic so that I can forget my troubles by talking to him. I need him as much as he needs me. And I stopped again before the church directory, ran my finger down the list of churches and preachers. It stopped at the name of Walter Thomas. Turned out to be the Episcopal preacher in town. I called up and I said, I'm an alcoholic from New York. I'm in a bad way. I'm not drunk, but I may get that way. I gotta have another drunk to work on. Well, this was something of a shock to the good man. Drunks, one by one, were bad enough, but not by twos and threes. However, he caught on. He was very nice. He gave me a list of some Oxford group figures. Well, the Oxford group at that stage in Akron had kind of broken up into some factions. Nevertheless, one chap was very helpful. I finally got a list of maybe 10 people. I began to call them up. Well, as I say, it was a Saturday afternoon. People were going away. They couldn't be found. See you in church Sunday. Until I finally exhausted the whole list. At the end of the list stood the name of Cyberton. And I said, oh. Must be the wife of that rubber magnate. What would she want with a drunk from New York on a Saturday afternoon looking for a drunk to work on? I even went downstairs, looked in the bar again, and something said to me, you'd better go up there and make that call. So I did. A lovely southern voice came over the wire. I quickly told her my story. She said, I'm no alcoholic, but I think I understand. Will you come right straight out here? Another friend who had time and who cared enough. I told her the story. She told me about Dr. Bob. How he'd fallen apart in that town as a surgeon. How he tried the groups. How he had read religious literature. How he tried church attendance. How he'd been treated medically. She knew he wanted to stop. Why couldn't he stop? She called Ann answered. And Ann said, well, this sounds interesting, Henrietta, but I don't think we can come over today. You see, it's Mother's Day, and Bob is a sentimental man, and he has just come home with a great big potted plant for me, and he has set the plant upon a table, but he is so potted he is on the floor. So I don't think we can get over today. Well, said Henrietta brightly, won't you come over tomorrow? So next afternoon, at 5 o'clock, Dr. Bob and Ann walked in the door of Henrietta's house. She discreetly ushered Dr. Bob and me into her library. Dr. Bob said, I can't stay but a few minutes. I said, I know just how you feel. You're shaky. You probably want a drink. The upshot was that we talked for 4 or 5 hours. And as his story in the book Alcoholics Anonymous will show, and as his recording made at Detroit not long before he died further demonstrates, the impression I made upon him was not directly of any character at all. He says over and over, this is the first man that I ever met up with who knew what he was talking about concerning alcoholism out of his own experience and out of the mouths of science. In other words, I took Silky's advice and I poured the death sentence into him as hard as I could, so far as his being able to get over it by himself. The spark that was to be Alcoholics Anonymous was probably struck then and there. I went to live with Dr. Bob and thought it would be a little safer. My business continued somehow in Akron for a while. I stayed there during that summer. And pretty soon Dr. Bob was saying to me, Bill, we better get to work. We better find some drunks. So he called the city hospital, got a hold of the head nurse down there. said there was a man from New York with a cure for alcoholism. The nurse said, "Doctor, have you tried it yourself?" He persisted. She said, "We've got just a man for it. Just came in here, used to be a city councilman, well-known lawyer about town. Couldn't get home from here the last 6 times. Been in there 6 times in 4 months. Couldn't even get home sober. We've got him strapped down." He blacked the eyes of one nurse before we did it. "How would that one suit you?" The doc said, "Well, put him to bed. Here's the medication. We'll be down as soon as he cleared up." And presently, Dr. Bob and I looked at the first man on the bed. And that was who passed out of our sighting hearing only a few weeks ago, who never relapsed since. He kept the faith. Then in Akron, the city on the hill, 3 candles were lit, and it stayed lit. How many people contributed? Vital contributions. Dr. Young, good old Silky, William James, Sam Schumann. Who then invented Alcoholics Anonymous? Well, it was God Almighty. Such is the story of how we alcoholics learn to be free of our obsession. May God grant that this AA Trinity of recovery, of unity, and of service be a story which shall continue so long into the future as God may need us.